Hello and welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I have an interesting stranger on every single week. Today we have John Huber and Zack Whittington of the Wandering Boys. I guess the first question is, what type of music do you guys play for people that don't know, and they were looking to come to one of your shows?
Sure. We play bluegrass music, fairly traditional. There's all kinds of bluegrass.
Sure.
And we're a four-piece with banjo, guitar, mandolin. I play banjo, Zach plays mandolin, and stand-up bass, and we all sing, sometimes in four-part harmony, and yeah, it's fun.
So how did you land on folk music in both of your lives? Because it's interesting that we're sort of in a city that's well known for a lot of other genres like hip hop and things like that, and you guys are going hard with traditional folk. So how did that come about for both of you?
You want to start, Zach?
Man, like I did not seek it out. It just happened. Okay. You know, it's like I wanted to play mandolin. I bought a mandolin and then I wanted to play it with people.
How did you decide you wanted to play a mandolin though?
Well, so I grew up in Decatur, Alabama, North Alabama.
Yeah.
And like music was always around. My dad played bluegrass music around the house. Okay. I listened
Shout
to
out
it.
to
Ted Whittington. But you know, it just kind of, it was just on in the background, and I kind of absorbed it, but listened to everything else that wasn't bluegrass growing up.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
But you know, they'd have like picking sessions. And I remember there was this, one of my dad's friends named Rex Cheatham. He's this large man with a weird sense of humor.
He sounds like a made up person. Rex Cheatham.
Well, maybe he was. You know, it's like childhood imagination. I don't know. But he played mandolin, and he was just this large man. And I thought it was just so great. It was really inspiring. And so like, the mandolin was always like in the back of my mind.
Sure.
I was like wanting to get one day.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cool sounding instrument. It's similar to the banjo with me, where it's like when you just hear it, it's like, wow.
It stands out.
Yeah, it stands out for sure.
And it's evocative of bluegrass or something. You know, I think we all hear those instruments, fiddle the same way, and it sparks something, some curiosity or maybe even distaste. You know, people have connotations, you know, that stretch back to childhood or social constructed kind of connotations, like with the banjo. And my story is pretty similar to Zach's. Grew up, my mom listened to bluegrass around the house.
We Spence.
Yep.
Shout out.
We're both fond of each other's families. You know, and my brother and I were drawn to music at a young age, started playing sometime around late middle school, early high school, but again, devouring anything we could that wasn't bluegrass, effectively, wasn't country music. But things slip in, you know, I mean, Led Zeppelin had mandolin.
Yeah.
There's all that Rod Stewart.
Really?
Yeah, you know, on Led Zeppelin 3.
Battle of Evermore.
That's on Led Zeppelin 4. Yeah, exactly. And REM was one of the first bands that I really remember latching on to. I guess I'd been, you know, 5th grade even, but there's mandolin and REM, you know, if you think of like Losing My Religion. So
Maggie May, Rod Stewart.
Totally.
It's in pop music here and there.
Yeah.
It's not.
So is the banjo. You hear the banjo a lot more than you think.
You do. And I think, you know, we all like to think we're cool and impervious to like social things, but Oh Brother Where Art Thou hit in 2001. I was finishing high school, had already been playing music for a while, and you know, always curious about new stuff. Sure. And that was a cultural milestone for a lot of people, including myself. You know, and it really ratcheted up the amount of bluegrass my mom listened to around the house. And her family is all from the South.
Okay.
I grew up listening to, you know, my grandparents, her parents, with Southern accents, and I'm from Southern Illinois, and it doesn't take, you don't have to drive too far to hear people.
Oh, that's true.
Speak with the drawl, you know, and there's something about the way bluegrass is people associate it with the instruments, with the fast thing, but it's really a singing music, you know, it's really strips down in its purest, well, that's a weird word, but I guess if you were to make it something that what's the most essential version of bluegrass, it would be the harmony singing, you know, and those people sing with a certain kind of accent, you know, and
a sharpness. It's like a cutting sound.
It is, you know.
It can be.
Yeah. And I think that the instrument stuff aside, that's what drew me the most into it, was that harmony singing, you know, and our band features that well, and we sing well together, and that's a special thing, you know, and that's even in itself a sound that comes out of American Southern music. But you can hear it everywhere. You hear it in the Beatles. They do 2-part brother singing that they got from the Everly Brothers, and the Everly Brothers got it from a long line of people that sang in brother duets, including the Delmore Brothers, who are from around where you're from,
yeah,
I believe.
I met Alton Delmore's youngest daughter at the Fillers Convention when I went home. They had a whole exhibit and everything. It was incredible.
That's cool. They're kind of like an early, sort of before bluegrass was called bluegrass. They were kind of an early version of country music that kind of predated some of the sounds and beats and feels of rock and roll, and, you know, some of the like later mid-century gospel music and country to follow and bluegrass to follow. They're a real big influential band. But, you know, we could all talk forever about this stuff because we study this stuff because we love it, you know, and I think that is probably the final piece for me, is if I'm going to spend a lot of time learning things and being involved in things, I want there to be stories. I want there to be some kind of academic or intellectual component that I can latch on to as well. You know, some depth. Yeah.
For some reason, there's a lot of genres out there that it feels like you can be disingenuous and still be successful. You know, but this is not one that I feel like you can be for some reason. I feel like it's an
interesting observation. What do you think about that?
I don't know if it's because our chances of becoming rich and famous are lessened.
My brain was going there too.
Yeah. You know, to be fair, but honestly, like you know, like we were saying, we got into it just because like we were so interested in it because of X, Y, or Z, you know, and then it just like the rabbit hole opened up, and it's like, man, there's a whole history, you know, this thing, and you know, like influences. Along with that, you just can keep tracing it back forever, right? You know, as long as you want to. Yeah. And it's a treasure trove of knowledge. You know, it's fantastic.
As is any genre, and I think that because I was going to that fame thing. Yeah. But if you really unpack that, like, we're not susceptible to the same kinds of pressures that if we were young artists in rock and roll or hip hop or pop music, there's only really one way to be successful, and that's to be famous. And that has a whole slew of things that makes people appear disingenuous and burned out and apathetic and buried in their image or their ego or whatever. And bluegrass musicians, just by the economics of the whole thing, don't have to worry about that, you know, or something.
In a sense, we're kind of lucky in that regard. You know, it just takes the pressure off and just enjoy what you're doing.
Right. Because success is such a, it can mean so much to different, you know, you can be successful and just do what you love. And that could be the success that you're looking for rather than the fame and the fortune or whatever of the music. So I want to talk about like, you guys growing up, because you both are from the southern portion of the United States. You more southern than him, but you both live in a rather large city now. So how was like the contrast of like growing up? Did you grow up in a small town? Or?
It was about 30,000 people. Okay. Yeah, Alton, Illinois. It's near St. Louis.
When did you come to Chicago?
10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was that transition from moving there to a city like this?
I had spent time here. My uncle lived up here. He lives in Southwest Michigan now, but all throughout my childhood, I would come visit either with family or my brother and I have a twin brother. We'd take the Amtrak up from our hometown and visit him, and he'd take us around to like the record store, the art museum, and take us to a show or, you know, stuff like that. And we grew up in proximity to St. Louis, we always knew we wanted to live here. And it's hard to think back because when you move to a new place, you want to be like tough and seem impervious. And I'm sure that there were things that were startling or eye-opening, but I don't recall being a fish out of water, you know.
Because how old were you when you moved here?
I would have been, so this was after college, and then I lived elsewhere for a year.
So pretty close to like your early 20s, mid-20s.
It was like mid-20s, yeah. I was like 25 when I moved here. Right, yeah, 25 when I moved here. So I had some like salt on me already, you know, like I sometimes think like it'd been nice to like go to college here, but I don't know if I would have, you know, if that would have been the best decision.
I know. I think about college days, like, oh man, I'm glad I went to a small college town.
Yeah,
right.
I feel
you're like
a little buffer.
Protected, insulated a little bit.
Right. Yeah, you can make some mistakes, and it doesn't get, you know, everywhere.
Yeah.
But for you, like going from Alabama, did you go directly to Chicago from Alabama?
No. So I did my undergrad in North Mississippi in Oxford.
Okay.
And then I lived in Cincinnati for a year. So that was kind of like
a middle ground almost. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I forgot about that.
And then after that, I moved up here. So I had like a trial run in Cincinnati.
right.
If that makes
Do I
sense.
like this?
Oh, there's public transit. There's a bus system. How does this work? You know.
Right.
But even my first few years in Chicago, like the charm didn't wear off. I definitely felt like an observer, especially getting my first downtown job and like just walking around and like looking. It's like, look at all these people going to their jobs. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to my job too. You know?
I remember that feeling too. Just I moved here for a reason, which is I wanted to live here, and it just always seemed to affirm that choice. You know, all the people I met or the things I got to do that I knew I wouldn't have gotten to do in my hometown.
Yeah.
You know,
the opportunity is just so much.
Yeah.
I mean, so I want to talk more about your music and stuff, but this was an interesting thing that I came across. You guys did like an immersive, like virtual reality sort of video. How many videos did you do? Like, how many songs did you do?
We did 5 or 6 songs.
Because there's a whole DVD you can get or something, right?
It's actually a USB drive.
Oh wow.
I should have brought one. Because I saw your question about that.
Yeah.
And I'll get you a copy of it. It's really interesting. So we have a good friend, Heather Maliak, who is a great fiddle player. She's a part of a band called Glass Mountain. A great band from Chicago. Yeah. Heather is also an audiologist, so she's an ear doctor.
Oh wow.
And so she has relationships with audio engineers and other audiologists and people that work very closely in that field.
Sure.
Including an engineer named Bob. He was looking for a band to try. Well, so it's worth mentioning. The reason that Heather knows him is that he made some innovations in in-ear monitors, which she worked as an audiologist for a company, actually not far from here, Sensophonics, at like Milwaukee and the Highway.
Okay.
And people were trying to figure out, the story that I remember is people couldn't really figure out how to reduce the input of the outside world while increasing the volume in the inner ear monitor, so like the earplug that's also a speaker, without creating so much volume that it's defeating the purpose of having ear protection. And apparently he fixed this problem and is legendary in the field. Well, he has been working for a long time trying to do this thing. It's like this immersive audio experience where you record into basically 2 microphones that are implanted in a mannequin.
Right.
And so there are 2 stereo mics where the mannequin's ears are. Bob named this mannequin Dexter. And it's like a CPR dummy, I think.
It looks like it.
Yeah, mounted on a mic stand.
We didn't give it CPR, but you probably could if you wanted to.
So you really wanted to practice.
When you listen with headphones, you can place the sound in the space. Like you put on headphones, close your eyes, you can tell, And you can do that with panning, but this was a live take. We did everything live in the studio.
Right.
Like, so there was no audio mixing. He did do some adjustments and some post-production and stuff like that, but like it all was live, and it's placed in 3D space for the listener.
Right.
In correlation with that, he also had been sort of as a hobbyist messing around with 3D video, and also like the virtual reality stuff that you could do like on a phone with the goggles and all that stuff.
Right.
That I still haven't messed around with. I did put on 3D glasses and looked on my computer, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, and so then, when we sell merch at a show, we're selling what's effectively a DVD case with a USB drive inside of it. And it's a really unique thing. And when people take it home, it's something, it's unlike anything else that people are offering,
Right.
And it's almost like something where art meets like something you would get at a trade show or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Like a mix between science and art or something.
Yeah.
It did. When you were recording that, was there any sort of like, it's so different. So how'd you like approach it? Because it's not like a regular recording, and it's not like live either. So was there a specific way you went about?
Kind of synced up with how we do things, wouldn't you say? Like,
yeah, I mean, we took a few takes, for songs like You Would, but it wasn't too crazy. I mean, really, it's just kind of like standing, kind of like, in relation to the dummy, kind of like at a, the similar distance, just around like a horseshoe kind of effect.
But I'm sure you notice, like in pictures and stuff, we sing around one microphone.
Yep.
And if the room, it depends on where we're playing, but if we were to play at a place where the audience was specifically there to listen and not to also drink or interact or whichever, which is great when people do that. But if it was a listening room,
Sure.
we could get away with playing all of our instruments and all of our vocals into one condenser microphone. So effectively, he knew he was smart. Bob was smart. He wasn't going to try and get a rock band to try this out. He wanted a bluegrass band because they're used to doing one mic.
Right.
They're used to doing live takes. Maybe a band will do like some vocal overdubs or something if they're going to cut a record. But like realistically, that's the way we work, so.
Yeah. Why is that a thing more prominent in bluegrass with the one mic and everyone's around that rather than miking up everybody's instrument separately?
There, you can get into that's the way people have done it.
Tradition.
You can get into all kinds of things. For us, what we find is it's really nice to lean in because you can hear everybody. So like the harmonies can be more reactive to each other, and they can there's a confidence that I think gets built when you're very close to each other singing. You can be assured of the things that you're hearing. You can be assured that you're not going to like sing. You can balance, right? Like,
Sure.
So the lead still needs to be the loudest voice, but then the other 1 to 2 to 3 parts in that harmony are not going to, they need to be just under it, right? And that's like there's a nuance to that I think just gets a little easier. It also looks cool. I mean, quite honestly, like when we open up for, say, a country band or a band that does, they have a different stage plot. Like it sets us apart, and it's got a unique thing that's also familiar if people are used to bluegrass or they're used to like earlier folk stuff where people did that one mic thing. So whether you're talking visually or audio wise, like it is an aesthetic choice. It's very much a choice. Like we could do everything we do without it, but it's fun and, you know.
It's almost like you're self-mixing yourself. Before,
exactly.
Right,
you know.
on the fly.
Right,
you know?
right.
Because there's like choreography to it. You know, it's like you got to get up to the mic to like kind of push your lead or your sound or whatnot, and then like get away and back out and make room for someone else. So there's a lot of movement and stepping back and forth. And getting close and pulling away. So.
It almost makes you not able to be lazy ever when you do a live show. Because you always, you're right. You always got to think about it. Do you say it's a loaded question because there's like debate why people do that or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you really get down to it, well, like...
You're going to get roasted on the message boards.
Yeah, right.
The folk message boards.
I mean, people will say, well, that's the way they used to do it. But those same musicians that set that standard moved their careers into the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, when they were all using separate mics and they were all miking their instruments. Right. You know, so it's like this whole thing, you know, the whole bluegrass folk thing, people like to use words like authentic and pure and all this. And there's a lot of confirmation bias in the way people talk about that stuff. Like, there's a guy named Doc Watson. He's one of my favorite guitar players. He was from North Carolina. He played country and blues and bluegrass and fiddle music and all this stuff. And he was really innovative and inspiring for a lot of musicians. People think of him as like this authentic, this pure thing. Well, I mean, he started his career playing a Gibson Les Paul in like a honky-tonk band. And it wasn't until the folk revival came that he started doing more acoustic things because concert promoters wanted that. And it didn't take him long to start plugging his acoustic guitar into an amplifier because it was louder and it was easier to be heard. You know, and none of those things would be on people's lists of what's pure or authentic or anything, you know. And so I think that there's a certain thoughtfulness that we have when we're talking about this, just to like not say something that pins us into a corner, you know, because like we do the mic thing because that's what we want to do, you know.
It's a choice.
It's a choice, you know, and it's not to honor something. It's not to be a certain way. Like, it's just what we like to do, you know. And that's the short answer. But I think that what this kind of music does allow for are some more in-depth thinking about what these things mean, you know, in culture and in society. And so we don't mind like kind of getting into the weeds with it a little bit because we've thought about these choices a lot. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you guys play at a bar in Logan Square a lot, right? You have a residency there.
We did have a residency. We might need to update our online bio.
Was that recent or no?
For about 3 years, we played every Thursday at Cole's Bar in Logan Square from 7 to 9. That was a great thing for us. It solidified... It made our repertoire list super long. It solidified our parts and our harmonies and all this stuff. But it was a big commitment that we wanted to kind of take a step back from. Yeah. I live real close to there, so Cole, the owner, lets me kind of have free reign on Thursdays. So I started a thing. When we stopped doing the thing regularly, I started doing a series called Folkways Happy Hour. And it's got a Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. And it's at Cole's Bar every Thursday, and there's like bluegrass and roots music, you know, country and some blues and some jazz and
and it's not us every week.
It's not us every week.
So you get to see a different band.
But we are playing there coming up, I think.
Yeah, I think we're going in March.
Yeah, in March. Yeah, we got a date in March. Yeah.
So how did you guys actually meet? Like,
I met this guy at Old Town School, folk music.
Okay.
It was around the time I started playing mandolin. I wanted to get out and play with people, and he was leading bluegrass jams there.
Okay. Do you still do that or no?
I do, but at the bar next door to the Old Town School is up in Lincoln Square at like Wilson and Lincoln. There's also one in Armitage, and there's also now one in the South Loop, but it's been around since 1957, and I teach there, and now I have actually an administrative job there that started a few months ago. But I've been leading a bluegrass jam with a couple. Well, Aaron Smith, that plays bass in our band, And my colleague up there, Colby Maddox, who's a great mandolin and fiddle player and singer, and he leads a bluegrass band in town called Sunny Side Up. Aaron and Colby and I lead a monthly bluegrass jam up at this bar. It's called the Grafton. And it's really fun. I mean, there is a surprising amount of people that play bluegrass in the city of Chicago. I mean, if you think about the roots of there's a long history of folk music in Chicago, and country music, and it's not surprising. I guess I would say it shouldn't be surprising, but it still does kind of, surprise me every once in a while. Like the amount of good bands in town, the amount of interest in the scene. There just was launched a website. It was kind of taken inspiration from, there's a website called Chicago Honky Tonk, and it kind of rounds up all the country events that happen. They have a calendar, they have a Facebook page, and they even put on some events. So some friends of mine got together and made bluegrasschicago.com that does the same thing for bluegrass events. And if you look at the Chicago area bluegrass events, which include concerts and jams, get-togethers and stuff like that, I mean, it's a huge list of things happening, in and around the Chicago area. And it's pretty cool, to be a part of a community. And I think that that's why a lot of people seek this stuff out,
Right.
is to be involved, and I think it's the same with the very vibrant stand-up comedy or improv comedy things that happen in Chicago, or the jazz. There are several jazz communities, and people want to be, I think people come to Chicago to kind of build things and grow things and be a part of bigger communities of people that are doing the same thing.
Absolutely. Like, I think about this kind of thing a lot, and I imagine, like, if there's something that you're into, you move to Chicago and post online, you can find your people.
Yeah,
you can find
totally.
other people doing it, and you will be surprised.
Yeah.
It's really neat.
Yeah.
So when you started playing, or you wanted to play with people and you sort of met him, did you guys immediately click and like decide to start a band, or was it like over